Good evening. Everyone, well, almost everyone, is of the opinion that the postal service in Canada is a disaster, certainly when compared to the service in the great nation to the south. We're going to be tackling that problem tonight with a man very responsible. But first, here's Ted with a rundown.
Should Canada pull out of NATO and NORAD? One expert says Canada must act first and lead the way in defusing the nuclear arms race between the superpowers. Webster talks to Gwynne Dyer, journalist and expert on the defense of Canada. The PM has promised the House of Commons a free vote on capital punishment sometime this year. Coming up with Webster, the Tory MP for Mission-Port Moody who's preparing the private member's bill on capital punishment, Gerry St. Germain. But first, we're paying more for Canadian Postal Service and getting less for our money. Fewer rural post offices, super mailboxes, and poor service are now the bywords for the post office. Tonight with Webster, the federal minister responsible for Canada Post, Michel Cote.
And first, a very short, sharp political question. Just how embarrassed are you by the odious and unacceptable Bissonnette scandal over which Mr. Mulroney did take some action?
Well, first of all, maybe, Jack, I could say that on that, I haven't been in politics for many years, just two years for me. But I could say that it seems to me that it hurts the politicians, their credibility. I'm not saying that you know, it's only allegation, again, but I could say that it doesn't help.
In other words, as a politician, you tend to go hide in the corner when people discuss it.
Well, let's say that, you know, on a long road, we think that, you know, we should keep our mandate, our directions, our objectives, and trying not to be, you know, hurt by that. But
okay.
It's tough.
Now let's look at the post office. Do you agree with my brutal remarks that everyone, or almost everyone, thinks the Canada Post is a disaster?
Well, it's not. I don't agree with that because it's not. Since the government took over in September '84, we've accepted the mandate to try to reorganize the whole thing. The post office is a crown corporation. It has a budget of $3 billion every year. There's 60,000 employees there. There's, just to give you an example, there's more than 8,000 post offices all around the country, and we have to deal with that. You know that. And
yet we seem to get the message all the time that the postal workers don't put in a full day's work. Letter carriers, if they finish their route in 4 hours, are finished for the rest of the day. While down to the south in the States, when a guy finishes his route, he goes back and works in the office for another 4 hours. Is the union what you would tell me is the problem? The union agreements, are these your biggest problems?
Jack, this is part of the problem that we have to deal with. We've given the management, you know, a mandate to work on that, you know, that aspect of it. Well, but it's not the only aspect of it. We have to buy capital expenditures, put the proper equipment there so that the productivity is being, you know, improved.
But have you really improved?
It doesn't happen now.
Look at the thousands of grievances you had. Look at the problems you have. Look at the annual strikes that are always threatened. Perhaps the answer is to...
Don't say that, Jack, because we haven't had a strike since 1981. We're doing pretty good there.
1981?
1981. There has not been a strike in the post office in 1981. We have improved the productivity there. I think that there's still some problems with the unions, but the unions have improved their productivity. They have worked on that regard. There's still a lot to do. We'll do it. But in all fairness, there's been improvement there.
And it's been noted for the bad management. And your new man, Warren, didn't last very long, did he?
Well, there's new management there. We've changed, we've put new directors there, and we put a new president, Mr. Donald Lander, which is a former, Chrysler employee. Mr. Lander is, received a full mandate from the government, and now he knows exactly what his plan is. And in fact, when if you remember well, we've increased the postal rates in June '85, and we said that we would create a management committee that would travel all around the country and meet with mail users and Canadian customers, and they come out with some recommendation: improve service and reduce the deficit.
But to improve the service, for instance, will you ever again extend delivery outside of the present areas? Because we get lots of complaints about people whose neighbors get delivery and they've got to go to a badly placed box. Does it mean that you will not extend home delivery as long as you're running your fantastic deficit?
Well, the new growth areas where we would put there, Jack, what we call super mailboxes.
We know about them.
And well,
These
yeah,
are the
I know,
ones
but maybe you don't know the good things about the
these
super
are the ones
mailboxes.
that the locks freeze and the neighbors are getting mail, but you've got to go to your super mailbox.
First of all, you have to agree with me that these super mailboxes are much better than the green boxes that were that have been put there by the former government. That's point number one. Point number two, with the super mailboxes, you have 3 services in one. You can mail your letters, pick up your mail, and pick up your parcels. That's much better.
But let me get back to suburban delivery.
Yeah.
You are not anymore going to extend suburban delivery. You'll just fill in places where the postman passes.
That's what the plan said.
Finished, no more.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe the day will come when the only way you can make money is when there is no suburban or household delivery. Everybody on box seats, maybe.
Well, I mean, before we go to that, you know, we have a plan, and we feel, we think, and we're convinced that we can reach self-sufficiency by the end of '88 with the plan that we'll put in place. And I'm sure that we can improve the service, have a more reliable service, and at the same time, you know, reach self-sufficiency.
But you're going to have to cut your service to make sure there's no deficit, as you promised, by the end of 1988.
Jack, we don't cut service. We have to live with our times, and we have to get an alternative to the home delivery. And these are super mailboxes. Look, the United States are going that road since 1978. France is, Australian is. So why should Canada go a different road? We've looked into every alternative of how to reduce and improve service. Super mailboxes, for us, you know, was the best thing to do.
You're now being heard and seen in a lot of rural districts in British Columbia. Is it correct that you plan to close all of the 5,200 rural local post offices?
Whoa, whoa, whoa. No, I got to stop you there. First of all, Jack, we got 5,200 that will be out of that. There's 1,700 rural post offices that, you know, are under review, that could be amalgamated, or there will be a change of service in the next 10 years.
So
from now on, we said we put a stop there, because we want to make sure that the guidelines that the post office has to examine and present to us will be acceptable for the population as well as for the member. And we want a full consultation period before that happens. So there's a stop there.
But you've frozen your plan to close more rural post offices to give local consultation.
That's right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, the 3,500 remaining will be franchised.
Oh,
okay?
privatized.
Right. What that means...
In stores.
Yeah, and this is when we talk about improved service. Right now, in these post office, Jack, what you have post office employee that, you know, works from 8:30 to 4:30 and then goes home right after, while that the drugstore is still open till 8 or 9 overnight. And when people like you go to pick up their cigarettes or whatever they want, you know, then the post office is closed. You can use them. If we franchise, then, you know, it's going to be the same working hours.
Okay, of the 5,200 rural local post offices across Canada, 3,500 are going to be by franchise. You mean they're going to be, somebody's going to have to pay to get the franchise for the post office?
Or we'll go by bids, and you know, and it could be the employees that could you know, have the best.
Now the other 1,700 will change into what?
Change in service, what we call the change of service. It could be amalgamation, where in, you know, rural areas, for instance, where you have 2 post offices within 5 miles, deserving less than 75 clients, then we could say that for a better service, because we have as well to improve service and reduce the deficit, that we will have to amalgamate those 2 offices. But that doesn't mean that the service will be cut. The service will be different, but it won't be cut.
But in many areas...
And don't talk about closing of rural post offices. We're not talking about closing.
Okay, you're going to franchise 3,500.
Yeah.
And the 1,700 will be looked at, and a number of them will be closed and the number amalgamated.
That might be the case, but in the future, down the road, when we will be satisfied with the guidelines, when we will make sure that the population will be consulted, and alternatives will be you know, presented to these
What
people.
about the delivery systems in the United States? I hate to throw this at you. 96% of citizens get mail overnight. In Canada, 59% get mail overnight. Are we that backward? Must we be that backward?
Well, I don't have the exact figures.
I think it's all right.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that we have a much better service than
And
what...
they pay 22 cents and we pay 34
Say.
cents.
Well, we've improved the service right now, so far. And for instance, when we came into power in September '84, Jack, there were no national control center, for instance. We've put that in place. If, for instance, you traveled you send your courier by mail, and like it happened 3 or 4 weeks ago, then the plane didn't stop in Edmonton and go straight to Vancouver. Then the mail that was supposed to be delivered in Edmonton was, stocked in Vancouver. So
you stopped that.
Well, we've stopped that because we know through the national center now, control center, that this is the case. This we didn't know before. So this is an improvement.
Well, we used to have the ludicrous situation in Vancouver where you had an excess of mail to be sorted here. It would be sent up to the interior, to points in the interior to be sorted and come back again. Has that been stopped?
Well, this is something that we're working on, but we want to work on an orderly manner. This is the kind of thing that the mandate that the post office received, the management received, and that they will work on.
Are you still keeping to the point, though, that it's got to break even by the end of 1988?
That's the message, and that's the request that I've been given by my colleague, the Minister of Finance, and so far that's what we'll have to reach, and with the plan that we've put in place, we'll reach it. If in the way to go we feel that this is unacceptable and unreachable, then I guess that as with my colleagues, we'll have to look at it.
Wouldn't you rather be in the opposition criticizing Canada Post than trying to fix it up?
Well, I think that we have to, you see, it's a service that we give to the population. They are entitled to receive a good postal service. We know that it was bad in the past, but if everybody gives it a try, a fair try, I think that we can succeed.
Michel Cote is also the Minister for Investment Canada. That's the old FIRA, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're Minister for DRI.
DRI, yes.
And you've got a say in making sure we get the Piola on the icebreaker.
Well, on the icebreaker, I think that you know that in a throne speech, Jack, we've decided and we've agreed that we would work to reduce regional disparities. What does that mean? That means that we have to make sure... that means that we're going to make sure that the BC will get its fair share of procurement, for instance, and other things like that.
Terrible to see a country governed on that basis. Just spend it where it's needed most instead of in the most efficient way, isn't it?
Well, I think that when you have we are a country that is, is made of regional disparities. We have to work on that.
Well, of course, we're in the
East and the West.
We are the new Newfoundland of Canada now, and the happy centre of the country with 4% unemployment are those selfish politicians in Ontario. If that's a bad remark, I stick with it. I'll be back after the break with calls to the Minister. Yeah, you've got a thankless job, Michel Cote, haven't you?
Well, I like it.
You like it? Some rumor that you're going to be shuffled. Did you hear about that?
Well, Jack, there's rumors all around the Hill every day. And so far, for me, I mean, it's Prime Minister's responsibility, and I rely on him.
Go ahead from Canham Lake in the Caribou.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cote, we are 25 miles out of 100 Mile House, and I think we might lose our post office. Now, I would like you to understand this. We have no telephones in 75% of our area, no public transportation, no other form of communication except for the post office. The people come to this post office from 25 miles away. It's sort of the hub of our community. We feel, sir, as if we are second-class citizens. So far, we have paid for our mailboxes, where urban residents get theirs delivered for free. If you close this post office, then for money orders, registers, our Sears catalogs, we will have to travel an extra 25 miles each way. Now, item number 2, sir, is if you want the post office to break even, obviously your government no longer considers it to be a service for which we pay our taxes. And I personally can't think of any other country in the world that regards the post office as a business.
Okay, hold on. She's at Cannon Lake. She's 25 miles from the nearest post office. 75% of the people don't have telephone. How can she be sure that Cannon Lake is a Canada Post operation, is it?
Yes, it is.
How can she be sure that that will stay alive?
Well, I could say, Madam, that first of all, thanks for the question. That's exactly a part of the mandate that we gave to the post office. We asked them to look into every riding, every rural routes, first of all, we stopped the closing of rural routes. Secondly, on the rural post office, we asked them to look at it, and where there's some, sensitivity that is needed. They have to understand what Canadian needs there. If that's the only way that citizens and Canadians can communicate, then they will have to show understanding and,
Understand, but if
be reasonable.
If you hadn't frozen this move, that one might have been closed before the review.
That's exactly why the government, freezed it.
So Canada Post Office stepped out of line by being too quick to close rural post offices.
Well, I think that with what has been reported by the members, I'm talking about members of Parliament, and the reaction of the Marchment Committee, we've reacted to that. We've instructed Canada Post to say, whoa, stop here, and make sure that before you take actions, that we're satisfied with the guidelines that you're going to take, and the guidelines will have to be sensible to the Canadian needs.
On her other point, it's obvious that your normal taxis can't cover the Canada Post, and you must put up the rates to try and break even.
I think that it should be fair to expect.
Fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Cote. Have you looked at the alternative of reducing excess management and executive staff with exorbitant salaries and keeping ordinary Canadians employed in delivering to individual homes?
What do you mean under Canada Post when they've got 14 vice presidents now? Is that what you mean, ma'am?
No, I just mean that I don't know what the executive staff is of the post office, but I would think if they're going into the hole like they are, there must be a very heavy, wieldy management.
Okay, what do you say to that?
Well, Madam, I think that I would have to, up to a certain point, to agree with you. When we are looking into self-sufficiency, we have to look into every areas where we can bring improvement. And management, we have to deal with that. First of all, increase the productivity there, and as well reduce the senior management. We've done it so far. The improvement has been up to 16%. So we've done something there, and we've reduced the number of senior management. There's still some way to go, but we intend to do it, and it's part of the mandate that the post office has received, the management has received.
This new fellow's name is Landers, is it?
Donald Lander is the new president.
Lander. Go ahead, please.
Yes, gentlemen. BCTV did an excellent story on the difference between American and Canadian postal workers.
Correct.
These guys are working 3 hours and they're home drinking beer by noon. It would seem to me that your biggest problem is the contract you have with these people is just ridiculous. You're talking about cutting back in the suburbs. If you had these guys out working a full day, you could double your productivity in your service.
It does seem a bit odd that after 4, if they finish the route, they can go home without doing a full day's work.
Well, I think that part of the comments that I hear are exaggerated, but the basic of that is that basically what the Canadians tell us is that we have to improve the productivity. We're working on that, Jack. There's a lot that has been done. The union has, so far we received their support, but there's still a long way to go, and we intend to work with that.
Well,
but,
the other thing is absenteeism.
And Jack, it's all things that has been given, in the past.
Oh, I know.
We weren't there.
And you're not...
when we came in, this was there. It has been there because, the former government tried to avoid strikes. So like that's what they did.
Well, sir, we're talking about now, and,
Yeah. Are you tough enough to do anything about it?
Well, yes, but we need the support of everyone. That's what I say.
Absenteeism is twice the national rate in the post office.
Well, again, there's a plan. We're working on that. We're going to reduce collective agreements. We're going to reduce the number of unions there. It's all under work.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. You were mentioning seeing mail taken from Vancouver for sorting up into the interior. I want you to know my uncle works in the Edmonton post office, and the Vancouver post office is actually on occasion sending mail as far as Edmonton to sort it before it comes back to Vancouver for delivery. I'd like to know if Mr. Cote knows anything about that, and then I have another question for him relating to the super mailboxes.
Well, in all fairness, sir, I might answer. I'm not aware of that.
Well, I'm very aware of it firsthand from my uncle. My other uncle works for the Ministry of Defense, and he catalogs these $247 gasoline doors, little gas doors for the fighters and stuff. The prices are a little inflated. But anyway, the second question is the fact that I live in the Surrey area, and a lot of people here do not want your super mailboxes stuck in their front yards, to the point of where they've petitioned Surrey Council. Surrey Council has written our various ministers, and I'm sure have been in contact with yourself, and they get absolutely nowhere. And here's a case where our politicians are trying to represent us to the federal government, getting absolutely nowhere. The council's being bombarded by people that do not want your super mailboxes in their subdivisions or in their front yards. Now, why are you doing this over their dead bodies?
Well, first of all, when we decide to put super mailboxes in growing areas, we usually consult with the municipalities as to the locations. We don't put super mailboxes in your own lawn. You know, we look into put it into private place.
They're putting it in people's front lawns and boundary parks there, and they're doing it.
Just a minute. Super mailboxes must be located where you want them located. Is that right?
We can put them wherever we want, but we ask the post office to consult with the municipalities and try to put there in public areas where it's accessible to people and it's not in front of a residence, for instance.
Maybe you need some liaison on that too.
Yeah, and Jack, just to bring something, we've conducted a Decima research poll for those who had to live with the super mailboxes. The degree of satisfaction is over 92%.
Fair enough,
So,
we'll leave it
Jesus,
at that.
must we working?
But the guy with the super mailbox in front of his window gets bleeding angry. More to the minister.
There's not very many of them.
Canada Post after the break. Question on unions. How many unions have you got in Canada Post?
Well, I'd say, Jack, that there are over 12, and we've asked the Canadian Labour Relations Board to reduce it because it would be, more useful to us, more productive, as well as for them. And when you have to deal with, a number of collective agreements and 60,000 employees, geez, if you want to work and be effective.
And as a good Tory, you can tell me it was the previous administrations that gave the unions what you would regard as these fancy contracts where you only do half a day's work.
Well, I wasn't there, so it has to be them.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Cote, I'm a letter carrier, and I realize that there's plenty of room to streamline the postal system, but should this effort be made at the expense of the customer? Would it not be better to expand service to the areas that are served by the super mailboxes and maybe try and regain some of the customer respect?
Well, I would say that, first of all, we've received a mandate in September '84 to deal with the national deficit. In that regards, Crown corporations are losing millions and millions of dollars. So we've decided that we would take some Crown corporations and try to deal with them. Post office was under my responsibility since June '85. And, the Minister of Finance request that I should deal with the deficit, and by 1988, so and while improving service. So
it's impossible.
Well, it's not impossible, Jack. It needs the support of everyone. We have to live with our times. For instance, in Vancouver areas where we have mail, the red mail boxes that we're moving around. The reason why we're moving around is because I'd say that the residents, the people habits have changed. Instead of mailing from their home, now they're mailing from the office. So we have to put the red boxes and put them where offices are.
Yeah.
That's as simple as that.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm a letter carrier for 3 years now in 4 different postal stations in Vancouver. And I can tell you for a fact that we only get 3 to 4 hours, depending on what day of the month it is, to do our route. Okay, we get paid for 8. Subs coming in can do it in 5 to 6 hours. And I've been fighting the union about this because I want 8 hours work a day. And
Now,
paid for 8 hours, and I'm ashamed, really, to be doing it. I've been fighting it, though, and you can ask any letter carrier. They can do their route in 3 to 4 hours.
Do you hear that? He's ashamed to get paid for 8 hours, which he's only worked for 3 to 4 hours in the day. That must be one of your biggest non-productive problems.
Well, in fact, Jack, it might be one of them, but we have to keep working with that. You know, obviously, it's with, you know...
I mean, if I'm paid for 8 hours and I'm in there for 3 hours, can't I just be told, okay, go do this for the next 5 hours? Can't I be put inside to do sorting? Or is that against the union agreement because of the letter carriers union and the inside workers?
But you agree that we have to do it in an orderly manner, not disrupt you know, the mail service.
What you've given is very difficult. What somebody has given, it's very difficult to take away.
All I can say, Jack, I could say an answer to this gentleman, we're working on it.
Go ahead from Kelowna.
Mr. Cote, one of the problems and one of the beauties of being retired is watching the mailman come in every morning with a fistful of bay circulars, Canadian Tire, and all the rest of the local real estate ads, etc. Yet I subscribe to a number of news magazines that when I receive them are so old, I've already began to cancel the subscriptions because you can't produce. What do you propose to do about that?
Junk mail.
Exactly.
Well, I could say that, you see, this one as well, it's a tough question to answer. And the reason why, it's because close to, Jack, 80% of the post revenues are coming from the business sectors. That means that these are mails like that, you know, contributes to reduce the deficit. So what do you want me to do? I mean, if I reduce that, then my deficit is bigger.
Yeah.
So I have to work as a good commercial corporation would, try to improve or increase my revenues.
One more question, I don't know the answer. Are you still giving the daily newspapers vast subsidies in the mailing costs?
Well, you know, this old thing is under, you know, examination right now.
Millions, millions to newspapers. From the old days when, you know, the things came by train. You should wipe that out, shouldn't you?
Well, not wipe that out, but at least try to help, because there's a lot of weekly magazine, Jack, that needs to be helped. Because these weekly magazine goes, and a local weekly you know, newspaper goes in rural areas where people read them, and that's the only way for them to read what happens.
Wipe out the big dailies. They don't need the subsidies. Southam's make enough money.
Well, then if you bring a change, you have to do it in an orderly way.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, it was reported today that the U.S. Postal Service made a profit of $450 million over the last quarter. So those that think that the post office can't be run like a business are very wrong. The real problem is, as we're beginning to see here, is again the labor unions. Now, Margaret Thatcher took on the coal miners with bigger, tougher union than the postal workers. Ronald Reagan took on the air traffic controllers. Why can't this government start acting like conservatives and stop trying to weasel out of their responsibilities? You're afraid of a fight, but you're going to have a fight if you want to get this thing back on the tracks.
Okay, good comment. How about you?
Well, Jack, 450 million profit in the States, I might agree with that, but look at the number of people that they have, 250 million people, and about the same territory as I have.
Right.
I get 25 million people, and I have to deliver the mail in Northwest Territory.
Yeah, but the point he was making, he regards you as a good right-wing reactionary conservative. And if you want to do it the cheapest way, he wants you just to slash the unions. And of course, you want to get re-elected. You wouldn't do that anyway.
Well, Jack, they're not going to get re-elected anyway because the right wing of the Conservative Party is sick of them.
Okay, we'll do the political thing another time. Otherwise, we'll get hung up. Go ahead, please.
Hello there.
Yeah.
I'm an American postal carrier. I just thought I'd give you a call. I'm up here visiting my sister. I think it'd be interesting for you people here in Canada to come on down and take a search and study on what we do, because obviously you're going to learn something. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, now before you go, how much do you make? What are you? He chickened out.
But
I want to know how much he made. You know how many hours he works?
But it might surprise you, Jack, but, you know, these, you know, the U.S. mail ask us how, you know, the concept of our super mailboxes. They like it. They want to implement it.
Well,
in France, for instance, they got plastic boxes, and people don't break them. They don't break them. How come that they break it here?
Oh, don't ask that question.
Well, that's kind of
Michel
thing.
Cote,
That's kind of thing.
You've elicited a fair amount of warmth and sympathy in me because you've got an impossible task. You're going to have to be draconian if you wanted to make it efficient overnight. When are you going to put up the postal rates?
Well, the postal rates, I think that they should be, you know, they're being gazetted right now. I mean, the end of the 60-day period will probably be over by the end of March.
And they go up to what?
Well, you know, well, the first class mail will be 2 cents. It's supposed to be 2 cents, and the average increase will be around 9%.
My thanks to Michel Cote, Minister in charge of DRE, Investment Canada, and the Benighted Canada Post. And I'm going to be back with a real right-wing Conservative MP after the break. No more calls in the post office. I might, I've only got one segment for the upcoming guest, do an instant rundown on capital punishment towards the end of this segment, but I'll just want yes or no. With me now is Gerry St. Germain, Conservative MP for Mission-Port Moody, whip of the party, and a former police officer. Now, your government has promised its supporters and all the people in Canada who seem to be clamouring for the return of the rope that there will be a private member's bill calling for capital punishment in certain states, certain cases, in this government, in this parliament. Am I right?
Jack, number one, I'm National Caucus Chairman.
You're not the whip.
I'm National Caucus Chairman, number one. But I am the member from Mission-Port Moody.
You got that right.
Got that right.
And you were a police officer.
And I was a police officer in St. Boniface, Manitoba, and the city of Vancouver.
And you are a caucus, National Caucus Chairman. Right now. When is Mulroney going to keep his promise to have a free vote on capital punishment?
It's being worked on right at the present time. As a matter of fact, I attended a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister and our Regional Caucus Chairman just yesterday, and the motions are being discussed right now as to just exactly what is going to take place, but it's going to be a government initiative as far as I can see.
Well, as we all know, rather sadly, a Vancouver police officer was shot and killed in the execution of his duty yesterday, although it was the first time since 1962 or 63 since a Vancouver policeman was shot. You have prepared your own private member's bill. What do you propose?
Well, number one, this is just horrible what's happened to Sergeant Young. And I think Canadians, we lost another police officer just a few days ago in Calgary, Jack. And so that obviously something has to be done. And I don't think it's so much a question of capital punishment. It's a question of law and order, of bringing back some sensible law and order to our country. We look at the erosion of the authority of policemen, and this is what's brought on this malaise.
What caused, give me that, you're on a very serious theme there. Give me what you think caused the erosion of law and order.
Well, number one,
we've still got the courts, we've still got the prisons, we've still got all the services we had before. What has caused the erosion?
Well, let's take just one example, the Charter of Rights. I say it's the Charter of Wrongs, Jack. Because what it's going to do, it's going to remove authority from those that protect the general public. That's number one. And that is of real grave concern. We have police officers that are going out and they're unable to enforce the laws that have been written. And what we've done, we've taken the authority away from parliamentarians and we're putting it in the hands of judges and the courts. And I'm concerned about that because we're the elected representatives, and here we have a situation like capital punishment. We're well over, in certain areas, over 80% of the population want the reinstatement of capital punishment for premeditated murder.
But the Charter of Rights isn't going to stop Parliament from passing any bill at once.
No, that's right.
Unless you're suggesting to me that the Charter of Rights and Freedom would prevent the state, on a test of the Supreme Court of Canada, from taking a human life in any circumstances whatsoever.
When I referred to the Charter of Rights, I referred to the erosion of law and authority in this country, Jack. And the Prime Minister said there was an epidemic as far as the illicit use of drugs in this country. He was right.
He only just...
Sergeant Young died at the hands of somebody that was involved with the drug community. So, Jack, I say to you that we have to get back to those basics. And as far as my bill is concerned, to explain my bill very briefly, it's a bill that would reinstate capital punishment for premeditated murder, and it would also deal with murders that pertain to kidnapping, crimes committed, murders committed in the
course of an offense.
In the course of sexual offenses, and also in the case of narcotics cases.
Death, you're saying that you would have premeditated murder where a man had decided to plan the death of his wife. That would be a premeditated murder. We've had a case of that.
Well,
you
no,
would have capital punishment. Yes, you would.
If it, the thing is, though, Jack.
I'm only trying to explain.
Yes, I realize that, but the premeditated murder in the case of the murder of his wife, it would be a possibility, but it would be contingent on direct evidence and.
And for the killing of policemen and prison guards, I presume.
I wouldn't. I would say that if we're going to go into capital punishment, that we not discriminate or pick out certain sectors. A human life is a human life, Jack. Regardless of whether it's a police officer, a prison guard,
in other words, a decision would be made after every murder charge or before every murder charge as to whether or not it warranted hanging.
I'm not saying hanging either, Jack. I think this is a situation that's been battered around. Capital punishment. That's right.
Now, there's going to be. Will it be your bill that's used by the House of Commons?
No, I believe it'll be a government initiative, one that is that'll be brought forward to the House by the Government of Canada, as was promised by the Prime Minister.
Now, don't you, or rather, do you believe that capital punishment is in fact a deterrent? Because we're always told when this debate comes up that it can be proved either way, that it is a deterrent or it is not a deterrent. What do you believe? You're going on your human instincts, I gather.
Well, it's a question of conscience, there's no doubt, Jack. But we look at the situation in Ottawa, where an individual had been convicted of murder, had been incarcerated, was released, and is now charged with the death of another young lady.
Oh,
this, I feel, in this particular case, it would have been a deterrent, because the second life wouldn't have been taken, Jack.
Let me put this to you. Do you not regard the execution of a member of our public by the state for whatever reason as a highly uncivilized, unchristian act, and that we could well protect the public and salve our conscience by keeping them properly incarcerated until the day after they died?
No, I don't believe so, Jack. I believe that we have a right to protect the citizens of our country, and I feel, given that the statistics that are available right across the country, I believe that this is the only way, and especially when we look at repeat murders.
I was going to take a little poll, but I haven't got time, and the fact, of course, remains is that 80% of the people probably would be in favor of capital punishment, right?
I would say in certain areas, that's correct, yeah.
Well, I'm always ambivalent about the damn thing. Certain cases you feel that man should be put to death.
Yeah.
But as a general rule, if you come back to your system, we'd be back to the old proposition of probably hanging people who weren't quite guilty.
Well, let's not get hung up on this hanging bit. It's not necessarily hanging. Well, the
injection,
administration,
hanging, electric shock, whatever you like.
Right.
But anyway, it will be when? This year?
It will be this year. It'll be very shortly. For sure. And this is the government speaking, not this right-wing member of Parliament that you got before you either.
Well, you better do it because you won't survive the next election, the way things are going.
Jack, we'll survive the next election. When have you ever seen interest rates at 7.5%, the economy in a better shape, and
30% unemployed
in British Columbia, and we're working to change that around, and the icebreaker will improve that situation,
My
Jack.
thanks to Gerry St, Gerry St. Germain, National Caucus Chairman and MP for Mission-Port Moody. Thanks, Gerry.
Thank you, Jack.
Next, Gwynne Dyer. My next guest is a military historian and international affairs analyst and a hell of a good filmmaker by the name of Gwynne Dyer, who made his name with a 7-part film series on war. Now he's back again, and he's got one called Harder Than It Looks. I want you to see a little snippet of it.
There's a strong argument for making the whole North a neutral zone, including Canada. All the northern countries might be safer that way, and so might everybody else.
Yeah, okay, Damas, I got that, Roger. Then we'll be standing by you, Roger.
Canada definitely should think about new ways in which its territory, in which the Arctic can be preserved. There's a way in which Canada and other Nordic and Scandinavian countries can be the buffer between the superpowers. And I think that there is a long history of Scandinavian neutralism, a long history of non-nuclear policies in the Scandinavian and Nordic countries, which Canada could emulate itself, and it wouldn't hurt U.S. security. In fact, it could serve to strengthen our security in terms of reducing the threat of attack on both sides.
The final goal is an end to the military blocs and their arrogant nuclear strategies. We've built up these huge alliances that threaten the world step by step. We'll have to dismantle them the same way, and somebody has to take the first step.
Well, here's Gwynne Dyer back in our territory again for a premiere of Harder Than It Looks tomorrow night at the Robson Square Media Center.
Friday night.
Friday night.
Yeah.
Friday. What day is this?
This is Wednesday, I think,
Friday
all day.
night.
Yeah.
That's sold out. You can't go and see that. There is another function we'll tell you about later. Gwynne, Harder Than It Looks seems... first of all, the Globe and Mail.
Yeah.
Here is the Canadian Institute for International Peace and Security, a spokesman saying that one way to peace for Canada is to consider mining the deep water channels in the Arctic archipelago and declaring a peacetime keep-out zone. Now, as a man who's looking for peace, what do you think of that idea?
I think it's a very good idea, frankly. I mean, let's face it, we're not going to get peace by simply loving each other and instantly disarming. You're going to have to organize and manage this, and there's a long way between here and a peaceful world. But in terms of keeping the superpowers apart, keeping them both out of our territorial waters and out of each other's hair, maybe that's the way to go.
That's crazy.
Why?
Because the Americans claim half these Arctic waters.
No, they don't claim them. They claim the right to use them, and we say they can't because it's our territorial waters, and if we want to enforce that, maybe putting mines down there is one way to see how...
And one way to maintain peace would be to mine these Arctic waters, our territorial waters, and say to the Russians and everybody else, stay out.
Yep.
That would be most un-Canadian, would it not?
Well, maybe we ought to try being un-Canadian.
What's the formula, and Harder Than It Looks, as you continue with your campaign to try and convince us that we should be a neutral country?
It's interesting. It is a campaign, I suppose, in a sense, but it's one I sort of found myself in quite by accident, because I didn't start out thinking that.
In other words, you started out as a military historian, and now you're being converted to a peace propagandist.
It's not a peace... Well, look, I mean, soldiers are peace propagandists, too.
Yeah.
I mean, the only argument is about how we get there. Everybody agrees we're trying to prevent war, so that's, you know, we're all peace activists in that sense. But the question is, how do you do it? And in terms of Canada, I think it is feasible that we can be neutral. And what we've been doing in this film, which is basically about northern neutrality and how the northern countries could basically create a buffer zone between the superpowers, is the possibility. They've been getting much closer to each other in the Arctic over the last few years. The U.S. Navy operates further north, closer to the Russians each year. Submarines, both sides on our Arctic. And they shouldn't be that close. It's dangerous, especially with submarines. So one of the ways that we could be very useful is by exactly that, getting them both to keep out of our waters. And in fact, the Norwegians and Scandinavians generally could very usefully do the same thing on their side of the Atlantic and insert this buffer zone between them. The other thing, of course, is that we really ought to think about being neutral because the alliances themselves are not a good idea.
Just a moment. You're suggesting, I mean, I've asked this question, I asked it of Trudeau way back in '68 when he was thinking of pulling out of NATO.
Yeah.
You're suggesting that we, who depend so much on American goodwill, should pull out of NORAD and NATO right now and become a Norway of North America.
Yeah, and I don't think we depend on American goodwill at all. This is a straightforward relationship of commercial relations and all sorts of other relations. When have they done us a favor?
Well, there's not much goodwill around at this moment. But in the case of the Shamrock Summit, whatnot, and our across-the-border friendship, there is goodwill.
That's why we don't have acid rain anymore, why we've got a good free trade deal out of them. No, come on. I mean, you know, that's public relations. What do we actually get?
Very little indeed.
Yes, okay, right.
If the truth was known. But it's the actual physical steps. The Americans would certainly be hostile if we pulled out of NORAD and NATO.
I think they'd be very cross, but that does not necessarily mean we mustn't do it.
We'd have to stop letting them test their cruise missiles in the tundra north of British Columbia, wouldn't we?
Yes, we would, and I'm not at all opposed to stopping that either.
Is there any strong body of people, as you were doing this, you concentrated in Norway and the Scandinavian countries?
Well, because they are very much in our position geographically, strategically, they are countries quite like us, though smaller. And some of them actually manage to be neutral now. Sweden does, Norway does. The others used to be neutral. They got scared after the Second World War and joined NATO, or were sort of bullied into it.
Denmark and company.
Denmark, Norway, Iceland. But all these northern countries have traditionally managed to stay out of these wars that Europe has had all the time. There is that tradition there. You can build on that. We also could be part of that.
Except we've got a new defense minister in Canada by the name of Perrin Beatty now, who's making the funniest noises about building up the forces, building up the auxiliaries, building nuclear submarines.
Well, interestingly, all of that is in fact what we'd be doing anyway as a neutral country. I mean, neutrality doesn't mean disarmament, not in this world. I mean, in fact, I think you'd have at least the size of defense budget you do now, though you'd be spending it differently. We wouldn't have tanks in Germany. We'd be dealing with our own territory.
Would it reduce our role, if any, in global politics?
I doubt it very much. I mean, as it is now, we're one of 16, the chorus of voices saying to Uncle Sam and NATO, yes, yes, we're right behind you, Squire.
We don't have any
we don't
role
have
in
any
global politics.
Exactly.
What are the chances now, and this is a kind of hysterical question, but occasionally it crosses one's mind, of a nuclear war? Surely chances are much less with Gorbachev than they were before.
I think they probably are, and I don't think they're very high in any given year. The trouble is we've got to get through not only the rest of our lives, but the rest of history without having one, because you only have to have one once.
Who do you trust least, the Americans or the Russians?
I don't actually trust either of them at all.
Fair enough. Now, you're speaking tonight at the Woodward Building, UBC, at 7:30, right?
That's right, yeah.
And you're speaking tomorrow in Victoria.
That's right.
Where?
University of Victoria, the Extension Department. I can't remember exactly where it is,
Tomorrow
but
night.
they know where it is.
And tonight you're debating the defense of Canada with Douglas Ross.
That's right.
He's not from this Arctic thing, is he?
No, he's not, no. He's from UBC.
Wish we had time to show more of your film, but at least we've given you a plug for your meeting in the cause of world sanity. My thanks to Gwynne Dyer. I'll be back after the break. Tomorrow, Adam Zimmerman, president of NORAD, top man in Mac and Blow. He's the guy who predicted 17,000 jobs lost in BC on the 15% thing, I think. And Simone Boubou, one of the most delightful guests on how to increase your kids' IQ, 5 p.m. precisely.